Welcome to the show, Israel. This is Peter Helland with David Wemhoff. And Dave, I'm going to let you jump in.
At any time?
At any time.
Oh, my.
Because we've been discussing, well, first of all, you wrote the book on how the CIA, you spent 7 years doing research. It was a lot of part of your life researching into how I'm summarizing it my way.
Oh, that's okay. You can do that. This is a free country.
Right. How the CIA had infiltrated the Catholic Church for the purposes of advancing the American empire through the Catholic Church further around the world.
Yeah, the CIA really is not the focus of the book. I mean, the CIA, the guys who work for the CIA get paychecks that says U.S. Treasury on them. Okay, that's the tail. They don't wag the dog, But the book is about ideas. It's a battle of ideas. We've talked about that before. But there's a lot in the book, okay? And there's a lot of discussion in the book. And it talks about how the Catholic Church came to adopt liberalism, or the Catholic leadership came to accept liberalism and advance that around the globe. And the United States, along with the American media and the American elites, targeted the major religions in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, particularly in the 50s and 60s, to get them to carry the message of liberalism being good. And liberalism, what does it consist of? Well, America is based on liberalism. And liberalism says man can do it all by himself. There shouldn't be any restrictions on man. Liberalism is best summed up by Thomas Paine in his little pamphlet, Common Sense. And what Thomas Paine said is essentially it's about the individual. The individual gets preeminence. Things like religion are relegated to a private matter, and they really could just consist of worship, the ability to worship God as you want. And that man has got freedom of speech and freedom to say and think and do what he wants. And so within ordered limits. And so what you have is the principles of liberalism in large measure contained in what's known as the First Amendment to the United States Constitution. Disestablishes the church, says that policies are not to be based on a religion, and also gives freedom of speech, okay, which means that people can say whatever they want. Okay, with this emphasis on the individual, all right, in liberalism, what you have is a situation where everybody can pursue their desires and their wants. Now, this is really important right now here. We're doing this in January. It's an important month. You have Martin Luther King celebration. You have the Roe versus Wade anniversary. You have the start of a new year. You have a new president getting inaugurated. And you have all that stuff from the election. And nothing's really changed. And nothing is really changing. Regardless of who you elect, regardless of who gets in there, liberalism remains. Regardless of what the pundits talk about, regardless of what people may criticize in the pro-life area or against gay marriage or any of the social issues that are out there that are really red herrings and really are simply there to control people, liberalism remains. That system remains in America, and it remains strong in America, and it keeps getting stronger, and it's extremely resilient. A couple of weeks ago, I heard on the radio, on National Public Radio, the president of the Council of Foreign Relations talk about Russia. And he said Russia is resisting liberalism. He used the word liberalism, capital L, okay? Liberalism. Now, this is what he's talking about. He's talking about a society that is not based on any sort of religious beliefs or religious tenets. America was not based on a religion. It was not based on Christianity, despite what all these Christian evangelicals and Christian conservatives and Catholics and other people think. It wasn't. Gordon Wood made that very clear in his series of books about America. He says it's based on an ideology.
The radicalism of the American Revolution.
And it was radical. It was radical. It's the first secular state in history. And what they did is they established with the Constitution, the first 7 articles of the Constitution, they established basically a free trade zone with the Commerce Clause, and they established monetary union. What did that do? That created large markets right away. Okay, kind of like a European Union 170 years earlier. Okay.
So are you saying Alexander Hamilton is famous for saying they asked him, how come you didn't mention God? And he says, I guess we forgot. So it looks like they're shifting to commerce. In other words, we're not going to serve God. We're going to serve commerce.
Well, you can put it that way, but these guys at the national level were very smart, and they were very practical men. And they said, okay, look, we've got all these different state churches. We are not going to put ourselves in a position where there has to be a religion of the country. And their idea was if we have a religion of the country, that religion's going to have very great power over us. They knew that. Thomas Jefferson knew that. All these guys who drafted the Constitution knew that. They wanted a disestablished religion because you had established religions in all the colonies. Now, their excuse was, oh, well, if we establish a religion, there's going to be, there are going to be struggles, whatever. But if you look at the Federalist Papers, they lay out the plan in there. And in the Federalist Papers, they say, look, by giving freedom of religion and allowing all these religions to exist without a state-established religion, everybody gets religious liberty. Everybody wins.
Without a federally established, because the states could still have a state church, which was removed with Lincoln's winning.
It was removed by the time Lincoln got there because the national government did not have a state church. And in sociology, what happens is the higher comes to control the lower.
It leavens, like Jesus said, a little bit of leaven. So he eventually snuffs out. It takes over.
Well, that's interesting, but the higher comes to control the lower.
That's what yeah.
Okay?
Same.
And then the public comes to inform the private. That's the way it works, okay? And the founders understood that, okay? And what they did is they got the support of all the churches when they said, we're not going to have a state-established religion, we're going to give you religious liberty, okay? And we're not going to have a state-established religion, a state-established church, we're going to give you religious liberty. And what they wrote about, the founders wrote about in the Federalist Papers, they said what that's going to do is it's going to create all this tension among all the different religions, okay? And they'll keep each other in check. So none of them will get power. And when none of them gets power in the country, then we can do whatever we want to do. And we're not going to be beholden to any religious morality, religious system to tell us what to do. Because Thomas Jefferson had gotten slapped down when he was in Virginia for some things he did by the state church at the time. So they don't want to deal with this thing. Okay, Madison was very clear about that. You're not supposed to have religious issues forming the basis of public policy. That's a real problem. All you get is an hour of worship a week. Figure out how you want to use it. And then what you got is this way to bring in the religions to support this thing, okay? And so they support this thing. They support liberalism as a result. Because now the religions can go out and proselytize, do whatever they want to do, bring in whoever they want to bring or whatever. But there's a problem with that because your emphasis is on the individual. And you have religious liberty to believe and do whatever you want, and you don't have a state religion. What you get is you get to the point where de Tocqueville said, you've got a religion becoming a form of insanity. And so religion becomes something that fanatics grab onto. And we see it to this day. Okay? And they live this fanatical life, and their own churches can't even control them. Now, what you have today is also a result of what happened in the 50s. And my book talks about this. In the 1950s, in the war against communism, the American elites and the American government united to get the religions on board. Okay, they wanted to get the religion. So they started putting out these articles and saying about how America's got Christian roots and it's a Christian society, and it's a Christian country, and everything was in accordance with Christianity. And so people bought that bunk. Okay, they bought it, they carried it with them to this day, and so now you got all these religious groups and religious fanatics that are out there
saying that we're a Christian country when the truth is our Constitution, really, which becomes our country because everything has to conform to it.
That's right.
Does not acknowledge God.
No, it doesn't acknowledge any deity, and this is a break with history. This is a big deal. This is a break with human history. So what you have is you have a situation in society where you got these group of people, who believe that America is based on Christian principles, and a lot of them are in the conservative camp, small c, but they're still liberals because if you ask them, they don't want to establish a church, and a lot of them don't even want leaders to act in accordance with the religious principles. You've interviewed people who've said, well, you just want them to think about it. Well, okay, but they don't really want to change liberalism. And then you have the liberals, small l, who I think are more in tune with what the essence of America is. The small l, the Democrats, I think are more in tune with what America's about, which is that man rules, and religion doesn't affect man's mind. It is something you go worship. It's whatever you want to do. Have have a drink with fellow parishioners or whatever, but you get an hour a week, go do it, but otherwise we make our decisions without God. And so that's what you're dealing with right now in the society. Everybody's a liberal, capital L. Nobody wants to change anything. But what the beauty of this system is why it's so resilient, is it's able to pull in so many diverse people for a number of reasons. And the reason it can do that is because people can read into the system whatever they want. And that's part of a function of the English language too. You can read into things a lot what you want. And when you read into it, you're empowered to interpret it as you want. And so when you're empowered by something or somebody, you want to keep that something or somebody where they are.
Because your interpretation is of equal value to anybody else's interpretation.
Exactly right. Exactly right. So that's part of the resilience of this system and the brilliance of this system. And so that's how it pulls so many people in to support it. You can achieve whatever you want to achieve. So you get all these pundits. You get all these pundits, all these writers, secular, religious, whatever, name them. They're out there, they're writing about one thing or another. They're writing about Trump election. They're writing about some social issue. They're writing about one thing or another. Whatever it is, from soup to nuts, they're writing about it. They don't want to change the system. The system protects them in allowing them to write whatever they want to write. And on top of all of that, there is this idea that, the truth will out, and in discussions, the truth will come to overcome falsehood, and we'll be all okay.
Well, that's the theory of democracy. Democracy allows truth, more freedom. Truth can play well better in a democracy than in.
Well, that's a theory.
Well, that is the theory.
That's an important theory. That's you say it's the theory. I think that's a theory. That's an idea that goes along in democracy. We can learn. But democracy, if you read de Tocqueville, what's he talking about when he talks about democracy? He's talking about basically the stripping of authority.
Yeah.
From the governmental powers. That's what he's saying. You're stripping authority from the governmental powers.
I mean, that the governmental powers is limited.
It's limited. It's limited government. That's right. And that's what America was based on. Based also on this political philosophy that said, people know better than government, and so government's got to be limited. Well, liberalism floats everybody's boat, or just about everybody's boat. Okay, everybody benefits. Okay, some people benefit more than others, and those who benefit more than others, or benefit first, they're the ones with real power in a society, and they can shape it. Because everybody else is trying to get along.
Some people call them the demagogues.
I don't think they're demagogues. Maybe some are, but I think some of them are very good businessmen, or they're very good media people. They're people who can make things happen, and they get rewarded for it, and they gain success. Okay, and as a result of success in the society, you're recognized. That's your source of authority. Because everybody here wants to achieve something. They want to achieve their wants, their desires. That's what America's about. You come here to achieve. So those who achieve and become visible and are something, they become the leaders, right? Because they did it through their own efforts. And there's a certain amount of value in that. There's a certain amount of merit in that, too.
Or the ones that can convince you that they have achieved.
Well, some of them are con men. You're right. Some people are con men, right? But the emphasis is on achievement. It is on material success. And those who are materially successful, whether they get elected to office, whether they make a lot of money, whether they write the next great American novel, whatever, these are people who are viewed as successful and hence leaders. And there is some value in that. There is some merit in that. The people did have to rise to that level through some sort of merit to do it. And so that's what you have. So you have this system which absorbs everybody. So you hear all this rhetoric about everybody all the time, and nobody wants to change anything. The churches don't want to change anything. The Catholic Church does not want to change a thing, which is rather shocking because, as my book shows, Catholic doctrine, as I understand from the debate in the 1940s, 50s, and 60s, Catholic doctrine actually says you have to establish the Catholic faith and the Catholic Church, and your policies have to be based on those things. And the government has to have certain power over the culture and over the society. But the Catholic Church now has completely accepted liberalism. So what you have is you have a Catholic society as a model of America. America teaches the Catholic Church. And so you essentially have the priests who are leaders standing up there with this individualistic homilies or sermons all the time, and telling people that they know best, and They have no control over their own people.
But in the beginning of Vatican II, the first document that was produced, my understanding was Inter Mirifica. And that was trying to move it in a direction where the church teaches the nation, right? Inter Mirifica was saying you need to get out there and be teaching the nation through all the various means available.
I think that's right. I think Inter Mirifica was about the means of social communication. That's what it was about. It came out in '63, and the church said we've got to control the means of social communication
Because we're to teach.
We're to teach,
and if we don't jump in there,
right,
then we're failing in our mission.
That's right. And they said we're the leaders and we're supposed to teach, and the church has just completely backed off. So what you've got. They don't even follow their own documents now. So what you've got now is you've got all these Catholic commentators and writers and bloggers, and you've got priests who contribute once in a while. But these guys just run amok. They write whatever they want. In a way, they've kind of become, in a way, a lot of these Catholic writers have become predators, because what they do is they dig into the psyche of a certain group of people. And they try to tap into anger, and they try to tap into dissatisfaction, or they try to tap into things that one person may like more than another, so they can sell ink. That's what they have to do. They have to sell ink, and that's how they make their living. And they think they're doing something good.
But part of it is there's a vacuum because the bishops and the leaders of the church aren't really following Inter Mirifica,
No.
And so there's a void there. Because they're called to preach the gospel. The bishops and leaders are called to be on the front lines of preaching the gospel, and people aren't hearing that.
Well, they have a message to put out. They're supposed to be the leaders. The priests and the bishops are supposed to be the leaders. And in any organization, when your leaders don't lead, what kind of an organization you have? And that's the situation with the Catholic Church. But that's the situation with all the churches, for the most part. Because you've got these sects, with individuals in them. And these individuals are their own popes, they're their own gods. They determine the moral law, because you've got private judgment, which is a Protestant idea, which the Catholics have now accepted, and you've got
follow your own conscience.
You follow your own conscience, right? Exactly right. That's exactly right.
So like you were always saying, parents will tell their children, "Well, you know best."
Well, you know best, yeah, right. Okay, okay. So I'm going to do whatever you want to do. That's basically the message that's going out there. So you got all these individuals running around, and they can't be controlled by their own churches. So you get to what de Tocqueville said. And de Tocqueville was writing in the 1830s. So, this experiment had been going on for about 50, 60 years. And he's going back to France, and he's reporting back to France what happened. And the French were interested, because the French had been very interested in social change themselves about the same time.
Well, Thomas Paine,
right.
Jefferson, Monroe were all over there trying to spread our revolution into France, which they did.
They did.
And people want to say, "Oh, ours." You really can't compare our two.
But it is liberalism that took off, and it went over there, and Napoleon spread it around, and so it's in those societies. But liberalism has certain limits. It has certain problems, and I think that we saw the problem start to emerge towards the end of the 1800s in this country. And I think that is the significance of Plessy versus Ferguson. Plessy versus Ferguson was the case where they said in 1896, the Supreme Court of the United States said separate but equal is constitutional. And I think that was an admission. By the leaders of America that liberalism has its limits. It can't necessarily integrate all the races. It kind of works within different societies, but it can't integrate the races necessarily. And so then you had...
in other words, Reconstruction after the Civil War was attempting to do a full-fledged integration, and then they said it didn't work.
I think that there was an attempt to do that in Reconstruction.
And then they thought the races were too different?
And ultimately, it just didn't work. I think that's correct. But then you have a resurgence in the 1960s, the Civil Rights Movement.
To try it again. And that has met with a considerable amount of success. But you still have, different identities. Well, there's a backlash now. Even, like there was a backlash to Reconstruction, probably by 1890s at least.
I think what you're seeing is liberalism is not so good at integrating people. I think that's what you're running into.
But they have to integrate because that's fundamental to their theory.
Well, you have to break
equality.
You have to break down barriers for economic advancement. And this is Amatore Fanfani. And this is what Fanfani wrote about in Catholicism, Protestantism, and capitalism. He said you have to break down barriers. So you can't have things that are not of the making of the powerful private interests. And so you have to break down, certain social and cultural barriers. You can't have these separate societies because you can create problems then in these liberal societies. So I think that's an issue that we're struggling with in this country. This ideology, this liberalism isn't quite doing the integration.
No, I mean, look at the Soviet Union. They tried to totally wipe out those countries, those ethnicities,
But they couldn't.
Couldn't. And now, boy, the Lithuanians can't stand the Russians, for having tried to.
It came back with a vengeance.
Yeah.
I think that's right.
Now, here it's a little bit different. I mean, originally we had all these ethnic churches, ethnic communities, and they pretty well have wiped them out.
Yeah, well, yes, to a degree, that's true.
After World War II,
to a degree, there's some truth in that, but there's still some ethnic identity, and I think that you have the formulation in America of distinctly unique people. I think Americans are different from other people around the globe. There is a difference. I mean, an African American is different from somebody from Africa. A European American is somebody different from Europe. You can see the differences. You can notice the differences. But there are differences between African Americans and European Americans. That's why we have all the cultural diversity. That's why we have a lot of the race problems that are still going on. And I think that this is an issue that is the limits of liberalism. Liberalism kind of runs up against this wall and doesn't know what to do. But what you've got is you've got basically everybody and everything supporting this thing, making it so resilient. And,
so what do you think about in the last 2 days? The front headlines of the paper was Mayor Buttigieg possibly, he's running for, and hopefully he'll get the head of the Democratic National Committee, and he just got back and spoke at the Martin Luther King Senior Men's Club annual,
right? Yeah.
And you have all these strong Christian men in the black community supporting the mayor, who's openly gay, and you wonder, how does Christianity end up supporting what traditionally is like one of the worst sins, and we just absorb it?
Well, I don't know. You're talking about gay as a sin. I think gay is an identity, and I think that
I'm just saying. Say your father, my father.
Well, I'm
how
just saying,
they thought.
Yeah, but wait a minute. I'm saying gay is an identity. It's an identity. It's to a degree it's a manufactured identity, but it's still an identity.
Okay.
And in America, we create our own identities. We create our own realities. No man, no religion tells us how to do that.
Okay.
And so I think in a way, as I said before, the liberal small L, the Democrats are more in line with liberalism, the capital L.
Oh,
because we create it absent, any sort of religion or superstition or whatever. And so that's what you have. And why are the Christians supporting that? Because the Christians gain materially from this society. They can be holy, okay, and still work to get to Harvard and be a corporate CEO. They can be holy and still write the last great American novel or the next great American novel. They can be holy and go, go to Hollywood and make a great motion picture. You can do all these things in America.
But see, okay, like in the real Christian world that we knew growing up, because our church was named after a martyr back in Wisconsin, so we were always aware that the early Christians would not deny Christ under the severest of suffering, and we admire them because they would not burn incense to Caesar or whatever. Okay.
Well, nobody's asking you to deny Christ now.
Well, the question
government's
is
not asking you to do it. Nobody out there in the private world is telling you to do that.
Yep.
Nobody's telling you to deny Christ. In America, you can talk all you want about Christ.
But is there subtle ways? Are there subtle ways that we deny Christ? And little by little, we're kind of like, where did it all go?
Well, let me ask you that. Are there?
Well, that is the question. I mean, can you live your life in such a way that is kind of chipping away at the teachings of Christ?
There are a lot of people who are part of the pro-life this January. They're part of the pro-life movement. They're going to go demonstrate. They're going to hold up the signs, save the babies. and they're going to feel like they're doing holy things, and they're going to go out and try to make a lot of money, and that's fine. America allows them to do that. Okay?
Well, there was
because America is about social advancement. Okay, it's about social advancement, and there are certain things that limit your social advancement. Okay, one of them is having a child you don't want. Okay. That's why abortion is ultimately about social advancement. That's what Casey versus Planned Parenthood was about. They said, women have the right to choose so it doesn't limit their social advancement, their economic power. They can move up in the system. That's what it's about, okay? That's what it's about. Everybody knows that.
Do you think people go to Notre Dame more for social advancement than for the quality of the education?
Absolutely, because the thought is that this system, liberalism, capital L, is fully in accord with Catholic doctrine. That's what my book explains, how that came to be. That's why people should buy it, or get it, or read it.
What's the name of it again?
John Courtney Murray, Time, Life, and the American Proposition. That's right.
But it shows how ever since, especially around World War II and the Vatican II, how the liberalism and the Catholic Church more and more have merged.
Sure, because people want to advance. They want to improve themselves. Liberalism is about the individual, elevating the individual. Okay,
but that's not. Jesus made himself of no reputation. I mean, the path of Christ was he took on the form of a slave.
And that's your opinion, and that's beautiful. And in America, you can have that opinion on a show like this and tell the world that. And I'm going to tell you something right now. Your social advancement is going to slow down, okay? Because there are certain things you got to do in today's environment if you want to socially advance. You have to believe certain things. You have to do certain things, okay? That's
and then people will promote your social advancement.
Absolutely, they will. Absolutely. People who think they're going to change America, they get into the pro-life cause. They're all fired up. They're against gay marriage, against all this stuff. They're wrong. All they're going to do is end up hurting themselves, or maybe they'll rise to the top of that heap. They'll be in charge of the evangelicals or the Catholic pro-lifers or whatever. But they're not going to socially advance. They're going to be marked, and they're going to stop their development, and that's it. So that's my advice to everybody in January. If you want to live a good life and advance socially, you need to throw out all these causes. You need to get away from all these causes, and you need to be in line with liberalism, capital L, which means you get an hour of worship a week to feel holy, do whatever you want to do, and then go out and be as like the rest or better than the rest. And you can be better than the rest because there's a lot out there that allows you to do it. America allows you to do what you want to do. That's the beauty of America. That's the attraction of America. That's the resiliency of America. And that's why it's going around the world, and that's why it has so many adherents. And that's why ultimately America will triumph over the People's Republic of China and will triumph over Russia.
Because, like we were saying, America's ideology, in its way, is almost like a religion. And then that religion or ideology gets into individuals around the world. It captures them.
It's liberalism. It empowers you.
And once a country individually catches on to this, whether it's through Hollywood films or, how do you see that it spreads?
Then the political system defends it. It spreads a number of different ways. Ideas are always tied in. Ideas are very important. That's why my book is about ideas. It's about ideas. America's based on an idea.
And ideas have consequences.
They have consequences. They're very powerful. And so what you had is you have these ideas that actually are complementary. Okay, this idea of financial material success is very complementary with the individual, elevating the individual. Okay, you have an economic system in this society which goes hand in hand, okay, with the individual ideology that underlies the society.
Okay, let me. I hate to interrupt, but as soon as you go like the first grade,
anytime you want, this is America. It's a free country.
Well, as soon as you go to first grade, that's a government school, and if the government, of course, is ruled by the Constitution, which is not mentioned, it doesn't mention God, but it's about commerce. So immediately, you're on the path of serving mammon. It's God is not really in the institutions as a formation.
Well, that's your view, and I will tell you that the institutions are not oriented towards serving any religious set of beliefs.
Right.
Okay.
Right. But it could be more commerce and mammon and the other.
Absolutely, because when more boats float, everybody can realize their dreams, whether it's making money or writing the next great American novel or being in front of the classroom or giving talks like this or putting on shows like this or having their own little family or whatever the case may be, having their own church, whatever the case may be. It allows them to do that. That's the brilliance and the resilience of the system. Okay? And this is one of the errors of a lot of the religious people. They say, well, we got to focus on the family. There's even a group by that name, isn't it?
Yeah, focus on the family.
We got to focus on the
James
family.
Dobson.
Okay, and the nuclear family is what we've got to have. But in a society that's based on individuals, the family is going to be redefined, or it's going to fly apart. In order to have a nuclear family that's going to survive, you have to have a society that reflects that. And in a properly structured nuclear family, in accordance with Christian doctrine, as I understand that doctrine, you have got to have a society that is also based on that similar doctrine, which I dare say tends to be on the authoritarian side. Once again, these are observations. I'm not advocating anything. These are merely my observations, and these are my thoughts after having studied it. And this is the disconnect I see and between a lot of people who are on the ground thinking they're really going to change something and do something, and their leadership, who should know better, and the reality of what's happening in the society.
Well, I was just in a discussion this morning with somebody, and I was reminding him, I said, well, the pattern we have in the New Testament for marriage, husband and wife, is Abraham and Sarah. And it says that Abraham commanded his household and that Sarah obeyed Abraham, calling him master. And I said, and he commented, he said, well, in 95% of our homes, the men are not commanding their household.
Well, and this is an evidence of what I'm saying, is that this is a religious-based view of how to organize the family, and religion does not form the basis of public policy in America. It never was intended to. And that's the brilliance of a book by Philip Vincent Munoz, a professor at Notre Dame. Actually, it was a brilliant book. It came out in 2009, and it really made that crystal clear. And so did Amatore Fanfani's book from 1935. It made that clear. And if just the plain reading of the First Amendment makes that clear too. Now, if you sit there and you say, no, America's not based on Christianity, people in the conservative side, in the religious right, whatever you want to call them, they'll come up to you and say, oh, wait a minute, you're wrong. This is a godly system.
Well, I have a book right across the way there about the movement headed by Supreme Court justices, governors, a huge movement of the absolute criticalness of the necessity of adding an amendment to the Constitution where they acknowledge God and Jesus Christ, because they saw that if they failed to do that, this is 1870, no, it started in the Civil War, that this thing would just fall apart.
Well,
that movement failed, but they were very conscious for quite a while.
That's still not enough.
No, but at least they were alert to the problem.
Well, because what you have in any society is you have this desire for unity, for security and peace within the society. Okay, even once again, in writing my book, I came across this. The Catholic doctrine is you're supposed to have security and unity and peace in society. That's what you're supposed to have. But a state church, whatever it is, maybe it's Amun-Ra, maybe it's Jupiter, maybe it's Judaism, maybe it's some form of Christianity, whatever. Okay, whatever the state church is, ensures that unity in society. Okay.
Right, not the government. You're saying the state church is what is most effective in securing that.
Helps to secure that, and the state government, the government of the state, has got to protect the church and control the culture. That's how you get these things that the church has talked about. As I review, what the church has said, I think that is a fair interpretation of Catholic doctrine.
And up till America, everybody believed it and did that.
And then when America came about, it was completely different because it elevated the individual and it gave limited power to the government. And the wink and the nod is everybody can do and be what they want. And that is very attractive. Okay, everybody goes that way. Nobody really wants to change anything. So it's going to continue on the way it is. What is sad and what I see is I see a lot of people get involved in these causes, and these causes hurt them. They really hurt them because they don't understand what's going on.
I mean, it prevents them from actually
It
digging
it
deeper and
prevents-
seeing what the fundamental real problem
Well,
is.
it keeps them from seeing really what the society is about. They get simple, false answers, and it prevents them oftentimes from achieving their own dreams and abilities because they get involved in these ridiculous causes that basically benefit somebody.
Well, there was a book
They
in
don't
the,
even
in
know.
the middle of the pro-life, back when I was involved in the pro-life in the 80s, there was a book called Shattering the Darkness. And he was making the point you were making, is that if you say you're pro-life, that's not just a little segment out of your life. That's a principle that you...
I'm not making that point. I'm not making the same point as that.
Okay.
I'm saying the pro-life thing, like the anti-gay marriage, like the causes on the left, all these causes are designed to serve people you don't even know. And a lot of times they block you from understanding what is really going on. But it's a way to vent frustration in the system. It's a way to control opposition. And it's a way to keep this thing resilient. The Catholic Church and all the churches are led around by a nose ring. You know, because I know this because I was involved in these conservative causes for a while. I'm no longer involved in them. I want nothing to do with them. You know, I'm not a conservative, I'm not a liberal. You know, I'm just who I am. But all these causes are the nose ring that leads all the churches around. So now, whether you're a Catholic or a Christian is determined by whether you're pro-life or not, whether you're against gay marriage or not.
So
That's
these
what
things
determines.
are almost leading the church around, where the church should be led by bishops, should be led by
They're
godly
supposed to
men that
lead.
really know their faith,
They're supposed to lead.
and we can trust them, and then you follow them.
That is their commission, as I understand Catholic doctrine. They're supposed to convert the nations, but that's not what's happened. And that's what my book talks about. How the nation of America, or how America's not really a nation, maybe multiple nations, but the country, the society with its leadership, the American leadership, came to convert the church to liberalism. And so now the church leadership is about liberalism. That's what the Pope is about. And so as a result,
You're saying the Pope is about promoting liberalism.
He
in a
promotes
sense.
liberalism. They've been promoting liberalism in the church for a long time now. And so the church is now an arm of American soft power around the globe. I'm just making that as an empirical statement. I'm not saying it's good, bad, or indifferent. I'm just saying that is the reality. Because the church doesn't criticize any of the systems of organization. It actually advances American goals around the world. And this is why the People's Republic of China is so concerned about the Catholic Church, because they know that the guys that get appointed from Rome, they know these guys have got an affinity towards liberalism. And it was about 5 years ago, the Chinese Communist Party came out with Memorandum Number 9, I think it was, when it talked about liberalism is a bad thing. Because it's
You mean
going
like
to
what
take,
the bishop...
because liberalism will take away the power of the government. And what you have in the People's Republic of China, it says People's Republic of China, the power is in the government. And if you're reading the magazines, all the business magazines, all the magazines, the fight is against government control. You want to limit the power of government so powerful private interests can have their way with the society. But there, the government has the say. Now, the government's given some power to different groups here and there, over there, and there's the struggle that's going on, you know. But they are afraid. The People's Republic of China is afraid of the Catholic Church because of this bent towards liberalism, the capital L, which the People's Republic of China and the Communist Party in China has determined is bad for China. So they're afraid of the Catholic Church, not because of Christ, but because of liberalism. So that's what you're dealing with.
Well, we were reading, before we started turning the camera on, John Fletcher, Wesley's successor, wrote in 1776 that the American principles, he called them dangerous politics, were challenged authority. Okay, so and they're like Archimedes, the lever of Archimedes, that he could, you can leverage these principles and turn and wipe out all authority on the earth. Especially in government or the father in the home.
Well, what Gordon Wood noticed with the American ideology, he
From
said,
Brown University.
Brown University, he noticed the reordering of society. American society was reordered as a result of this ideology. I mean, in 40 years, he said it was rather dramatic.
Yeah, well, I read his book, and he gave all kinds of stories about individual
Yeah.
plantation owners or whatever, the trouble they were having running their household, because now they couldn't rule by fear. They had to rule by love. Okay? Because fear implied I'm in charge. Well, now you're not in charge. This ideology is in charge. So you have
Well, you manipulate people's consent, is what you do. You manipulate their consent.
because this ideology required authorities from the consent.
Because everybody is their own, right? We're living in a democracy, so we're all equal, we're all independent, we're all rulers. So you gotta basically engineer my consent. You gotta manipulate me to say yes, to like you, or whatever the case is. And so that's what you have. And you now have a society which, in large measure, is competitors and customers, and there is no friendship in that society. And so you have this constant struggle day to day. In everyone's life, and it's exhausting, because everybody is trying to make a dollar, and they're all alone, and they have to do things the right way to stay in the right club, and so on and so forth. And you're all by yourself. And so what you do is you get these little groups, that kind of stick together, kind of hang on for a little bit, and they break up from time to time.
Well, if you wanted to summarize it, I mean, the shift was the king was the authority, traditional authority, and now it's with the people. Okay, the people's consent is now the authority. But what that ideology has done, it sucked. First of all, it sucked most of the Protestant churches. So Christian Zionism, if you look at it closely, the doctrine of Christian Zionism is Christ came to set up his kingdom, but the people rejected it, when he first came. Why? Because he didn't have authority. Obviously, Christ didn't have authority. Authority is with the consent of the people. And when the people didn't consent to Christ and they killed him, well, that's just how it works. So that translates everywhere. The father in the home has internalized it from his religion. Now, the Catholic Church is being sucked in now. They took a little longer. Like you're saying now, follow your conscience or whatever. No, you know what's best. Okay. But so the religion has taught you that your authority comes from the consent of the ones you rule over. And the government tells you the same thing. So they both work together to really undermine the original sense of authority, which I believe comes from Adam, and Adam was given the charge to take dominion. And that there's a thrust that Adam had a duty to take dominion. And that's, we've lost sight of that. The father in the home has lost sight of it. The bishops have lost sight of it. The people running the government have lost sight of it.
Yeah, you got an ideology which reordered society, and that's been accepted as good. And so that's what the churches are advancing, and that's what they're promoting. And I don't see that changing anytime soon. I mean, because they're comfortable, they're able to achieve what they want to achieve. So that's what you have.
Now, is Fanfani? Who was really kind of fighting this in their writings, and it was detecting this, trying to warn? Going back in the 1950s, or people were seeing this, and they tried to.
I don't think they were seeing it. I don't think people saw it. I think that what you had is a theological discussion at a certain level. What you've had recently is you've had some people speak out in Europe saying, what's happening, our nation is being destroyed. That's what you're having. And of course the Catholic Church just kind of goes along with the destruction of the various nations that they created in Europe. And a lot of people talk about the Muslim influx into Europe. But what you have in Europe, what one Catholic bishop recently said is you've got a situation where societies have basically de-Christianized themselves in Europe because they've accepted liberalism as a way of organizing, which is no state-established church. Well, liberalism would not have caught on over there if it had not succeeded in America. America was the great experiment. America made it possible. America was a proactive, forward-looking implementation of this ideology on how to organize society. And there were some changes in Europe. There were some adaptations to it. But that's how you have to look at it. And you have to look at Christianity coming along all these years and then liberalism popping up as a reaction to Christianity or a counter-reaction to Christianity. Then that's how you come to understand, what it's really about. It was an antidote to Christianity, and a great deal of creativity comes out of liberalism, and a great deal of individual personal freedom comes out of it. There's no doubt about it. People are free to pursue things. They don't have a priest or a bishop or a rabbi or an imam standing over them telling them what to think and what to do. So they're free to do what they want to do. They can pursue it. They can push the envelope technologically. And that is, it's kind of like atomic power. America is kind of like atomic power. It breaks all these little people down into individuals, but it releases all this creative energy at the same time. It's a brilliant system. It pulls everybody in. And it's produced a lot of light and a lot of warmth. There's no doubt. It's produced a lot of peace and a lot of security. But liberalism is on the march. I mean, it has to keep moving, okay? And so that's why China and Russia are next, and they'll be absorbed. They'll lose.
But doesn't it tend to corrupt itself? Internal corruption,
No,
individual corruption.
Liberalism is perfectly consistent. It is living in accordance with its original tenets. Absolutely, it is.
But the individual, how does he sustain his morality? How does he prevent
that's
himself?
That's an individual choice. You do that however you want. You figure that out. Okay. Talk to your holy man, and you just go from there. Okay. But that's not the concern of the government. That's not the concern of the societal elites. They're not interested in that. They don't have to be, because everybody can do what they want. Everybody's free. Everybody's boat floats. That's what you get.
Right,
but what you have, what I think you're seeing with liberalism, is it can reorder societies, similar societies, but I think it has a problem crossing certain barriers, and these barriers, could be ethnic, and they could be racial. That could be part of the issue here that we're dealing with in this country.
So therefore, liberalism can't really complete itself, because it would require a thorough integration.
Yeah, I don't think
in some cases it may not be able to achieve it.
I don't think it can fully integrate some groups. I think that's an issue you deal with, right? But those groups can become little bastions of liberalism among themselves. So I think it's not. It's still worthy of some study, but I think that's what you're dealing with.
But you're saying also that this experiment has never really been tried before in history.
No, it's the first time ever, and it's wildly successful, and it's going to continue to be wildly successful. It's going to continue to be that way. It appeals to something in people. It empowers people, and so they're going to stick with it. Nobody wants to change it. Nobody wants it. The Catholic Church doesn't want to change it, even though their doctrine speaks against it. The leadership doesn't want to change. Nobody wants to change it.
Well, when they came out with that decree against Americanism, was Americanism a word similar to liberalism in your mind?
It's the same thing.
Same thing.
It's the same thing.
So at one time, the church really saw it as a threat,
Yeah,
and spoke against it.
They did.
But then liberalism, Americanism actually won them over.
You're pulling your priests and your leaders from a society that's a liberal society, capital L. So what are you going to do? You can't resist it. You just can't. You can't resist it.
Well, obviously God has a remnant. I mean, do you see around the world people trying to win over this?
I don't know. You got a crystal ball. All the more power to you. America allows you to look in that crystal ball. You tell me what you see.
Yeah. Well, unless you detect this, you could be, how would you say it? You're going 2 steps forward, but you're on this liberalism ship that's sending you 3 steps the other way. So it looks like you're making progress.
I really don't know what you're talking about.
Okay.
But what I will tell you is that people aren't dealing with the system of organization known as liberalism. There's this idea that man can do it by himself. You don't need a state church. That the law of God is, and a lot of religions hold this law of God's in your heart, and that's a corruption of what Jeremiah said in the Old Testament. I mean, I've read the scriptures, and the scriptures are, if aside from the theological, religious value of them, the Holy Bible is an important book because it holds a number of cultural norms and archetypes that have influenced Western society for a very long time, and other societies for a very long time. So this idea that Jeremiah put out in the Bible about things being written in your heart, okay, that's beautiful, that's wonderful, great, okay, but then the Catholic Church says, well, no, that can be, you can get confused on that. You may be confused on what natural law is, or how to read it, or how to understand it. And so that's why, the church doctrine was you need a state church. And that's why a lot of Protestant churches understood that too. That's why a lot of the other religions understand that too. And in fact, in my book, I talk about Monsignor Shea, who died in 1990. He was at Seton Hall. He was a professor. I talked to some of his students. Monsignor Shea said, the history of humanity has been state churches. It is not in the order of the natural law to have a disestablished church.
Even Patrick Henry said every state should have a state church.
Absolutely. This was a big issue in Virginia. And Madison and Jefferson wanted to disestablish the church in Virginia, and this was a big fight. Okay, this was a big fight, and they fought it down to the last 8 minutes or so of their lives. That's how they did it.
And Patrick Henry wouldn't go to the convention. He said, "I smell a rat."
Well,
and I don't know what he meant exactly.
Well, these guys were smart. The founders were smart men, and they had certain principles, and they were brilliant men. The American founders were absolutely brilliant men, and they were practical. They knew how things worked. They knew how people worked. They knew how societies worked. They could think, something a lot of people nowadays can't.
Well, when I was reading your book, in one of your summaries, the person that was most admired was like this businessman type. And see, my grandfather was like this very successful businessman, and we're always told it took 6 men to take his place after he died.
So
he was a businessman,
yeah.
And my dad admired him.
This is Gerald Hurd. Gerald Hurd was an Irishman. He came to the United States. He became one of his benefactors was Henry Luce. Henry Luce really promoted Gerald Hurd's writings. Gerald Hurd said, he wrote all this stuff. In many ways, he was the progenitor of the gay rights movement. In many ways, he was. But Henry Luce liked what he did and what he said, and Hurd gave his talk in Berkeley in 1956. I think it was Berkeley. And he basically said the businessman is the ultimate arbiter of right and wrong. He should know. You let him do what he wants to do. Now, that ties in very well with the Harvard historian Bixler, who wrote in the 1930s, a Harvard theologian rather, who wrote in the 1930s about Americans making God in their own image. Of course we do. Americans make God in their own image. They make marriage in their own image. They define life when they want to define life. They do a lot of things they want to do. That's what America was based on. The ability of man to make that determination without a religion telling him. That is the essence of America. And that's the fundamental dishonesty of the conservatives. There's this dishonesty these people have. Oh no, America was based on Christian principles. No, it wasn't. It was based on the idea that man will tell you who God is. And everybody forms God in their own image. And that's what America was based on. And it has led to this enormous amount of creativity because Jefferson was right. All these shackles fell off the mind. And you didn't have anybody looking over your shoulder telling you can't do this, you can't do that, that's a sin, that's right, that's wrong. You could do what you want to do. You could follow your creativity. You could do what you want to do. Now, the downside of that is you get the religious fanatics. Okay? The same thing that informs the creativity informs the fanatics. The same individual. And the churches can't control either one.
Yeah,
that's what you deal with. But you have things like the pro-life movement, the family values movement that channels this dissent in a harmless way, and you have all these writers and bloggers, writing about everything, and they're writing about all this stuff that doesn't matter. They will not get to the basic issues. Okay, they will not address the basic issues of the system of organization of this society. They'll talk about the election, they'll talk about this policy, they'll talk about that movie, they'll talk about this guy over here, that gal over there, whatever, that movement over there, but it doesn't deal with the basic issues. And so liberalism continues to exist.
And to summarize it, there's many ways to summarize it, but in one sense, you're saying they don't want to talk about the historical fact that we're the first time we don't have a state church, and to not have a state church of some sort in that concept is revolutionary.
It is revolutionary, and I think like John Adams and Thomas Jefferson held on to that revolutionary idea even down to the last 4 minutes of their life, because
they wanted to be able to determine freedom. Freedom was if you. I was reading Kant, and Kant. They say Kantian, but Immanuel Kant, and they say he was the real revolutionary The American Revolution was revolutionary.
Do you think you could define Kant's philosophy in less than 3 minutes?
The way, like you said, the way I want to, yeah.
The way you want to. Or, because you always want to make sure that there's enough time
okay.
to answer.
Yeah. Well, they say Kant is the most complicated, but he had this idea that you can't know God, and so God becomes this unknowable, and therefore, then we don't need. It ended up concluding we don't need God. That you're able to know the
that's
moral
right. That's
law.
what liberalism is based on. We don't need God. You can get whatever you want from God in private. We're going to act in public the way we want to act.
Right. So when World War II parents told their kids how we were raised, you know best. They were coming from a view that you kind of know the moral law, and not only that, you really do know the moral law, and you're able to do it. So I trust you, son. I trust you to do what's right.
Yeah, do the right
thing. And they didn't have to tell you anything what Christ said. They didn't have to inform you on.
We don't have to talk about it. It's all understood. It's all part of the cultural milieu. You don't want to be offensive to anybody, not even in the last 3 minutes of their discussion.
Right. So, so anyway, this is a great challenge because we don't know what the answer is exactly. I mean, we know what the problem is, and it's hard to summarize what the answer is. You can say, well, Dave, are you saying we need a Catholic state church?
I'm not giving you any answers. I'm just telling you my observations based on my research. You can do whatever you want. I think they're borne out by a lot of other people and by a lot of objective things that are happening. And I just don't want people. The only thing I want is I don't want people to delude themselves. At any time in their life, especially the last 2 minutes of their life, that somehow, they're doing something in accordance with some system that doesn't exist. They need to come to grips with reality. And I think the reality is what I've described here to you.
That our system is liberalism. And
it's liberalism.
Right, and so it doesn't need God, and it assumes that you can do the right thing and know the right thing.
Right.
Just from your own conscience.
And there's room for all of us.
Right, so we're all inclusive.
Right.
We're down to the end here of the show. You're not writing another 700-page book with 7 years of research?
I'm not spending 7 years on the next one. I've started the next one already. Yeah, but I already got the initial research done. I need to do some more, but I've already started working on it. I think I mentioned that before to you. Yeah. But it's not going to take 7 years this time.
Well, it doesn't require going you traveled all over, did all
research. I don't have to travel around the world this time, no. Around the United States, no.
Okay, so but it does center on. You don't have to tell us what it is, but
this society is fascinating to me. It's America is fascinating. It's amazingly resilient. It's just a fascinating study.
Yeah,
I'm just really fascinated by it.
Well, I do know you have to know what your church teaches, and you have to know what your country teaches, but what your country teaches is subtle here, but it does teach something.
Oh, it teaches a lot.
And we've taken it in, so you need to know what you've been taught.
We take it in 60 seconds in the minute.
Right.
Or maybe 58.
Okay. Well, this is on the on the show Israel, and we didn't directly touch on the main themes here. Although I think it's very helpful what you're researching, and I can't wait to see.
Well, thanks for having me, Peter. It's always a pleasure talking to you. I think you're a great guy, and I think that a lot of people need to understand that class is really important in America.
Yeah, but you're saying that not a lot of people are tackling this issue.
No, they're not dealing with it.
Yeah. So, thank you for watching this show, Israel, and this is David Wemhoff and Peter Helland. Until the next show, God bless.